Imagine a map of the world in the mid-19th century. Tsar Nicholas III of Russia looks across the Black Sea and whispers a phrase that will echo through history, calling his great rival a sick man, a very sick man. For millions of people, the story of the Ottoman Empire is one of a glorious rise under Suleiman the Magnificent, followed by a slow, pathetic, centuries-long decay. We are taught that this superpower simply fell asleep while the West industrialized, inevitably rotting away until it collapsed. But there is a glaring contradiction in this popular story. In the brutal arena of global empires, weak states do not survive for 300 years. If the empire was truly dying by the 1700s, it should have been conquered and erased from the map. Yet, it survived against the combined might of the British, French, and Russian empires. What if this state was not a decaying relic, but a highly adaptive survival machine? In this investigation, we will uncover the hidden engineering, ruthless calculations, and historical paradoxes that kept the world's most impossible empire alive. To understand the scale of this survival, we must look at the sheer geography of the Ottoman domain. At its peak, the empire stretched from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Yemen, encompassing the Balkans, North Africa, the Middle East, and the Caucasus. Textbooks often portray the later Ottoman sultans as isolated figures hiding in palaces, completely oblivious to the changing world outside. The decline is usually described as a straight, downward line of incompetence. But when researchers examine Ottoman state archives, diplomatic cables, and tax registers, a completely different reality emerges. The popular explanation of mere stagnation is dangerously incomplete. The empire's longevity was not an accident of geography or a stroke of luck. As we peel back the layers of history, we find a complex system designed specifically to bend without breaking, answering the core question of why the Ottoman Empire survived so much longer than it should have. The first major puzzle historians face is the lack of aristocratic civil war. In almost every European empire, dynasties were constantly threatened by wealthy noble families rising up to challenge the throne. Yet, for centuries, the Ottoman sultans rarely faced internal rebellions from entrenched land-owning elites. A popular myth suggests this was simply due to brutal religious tyranny, painting a picture of a despotic ruler wielding unquestioned fear. However, the study of early Ottoman palace ledgers reveals a much more calculated truth. The real explanation lies in the devshirme system. Instead of relying on a hereditary nobility that could build rival power bases, the state conscripted Christian boys from the Balkans. These boys were converted, given world-class education, and trained to become the empire's elite military commanders and grand viziers. The twist is profoundly ironic. The most powerful men in the empire were technically enslaved. By ensuring that the highest levels of government were staffed by a meritocratic class, with no hereditary ties to local populations, the state eliminated the threat of a rival aristocracy. The bureaucracy was a masterclass in engineered loyalty. Yet, a loyal administration at the center does not explain how the empire managed to rule over millions of people belonging to dozens of different faiths without constant religious warfare. How did a deeply Islamic empire govern a massive Christian majority in the Balkans? Tourist legends and exaggerated accounts often fall into two extremes. Either the Ottomans forced everyone to assimilate through violent conversion, or they existed in a utopian state of perfect harmony. Neither is true. The real evidence, found in centuries of provincial court records, points to a highly pragmatic legal framework known as the millet system. The government recognized that enforcing uniform religious law across 3 continents was logistically impossible. Instead, they organized non-Muslim subjects into legally protected religious communities, or millets. Each millet was granted the authority to rule itself under its own laws and collect its own taxes. The twist here is that what modern observers view as early religious tolerance was actually a sophisticated form of imperial outsourcing. By allowing local religious leaders to handle daily governance, the state saved massive administrative resources and redirected potential unrest toward local patriarchs rather than the Sultan. The empire functioned precisely because it was decentralized by design. This internal balance eventually faced an overwhelming external threat. By the 19th century, the industrializing empires of Britain, France, and Russia possessed military technologies that the agrarian Ottoman state simply could not match. The glaring historical contradiction is that these European powers could have easily marched into Istanbul and partitioned the empire. A prevalent misconception is that the Ottomans survived through the mercy of a civilized Europe. Historical reality, exposed through declassified diplomatic correspondences, reveals a brilliant, high-stakes game of geopolitical manipulation. The Ottomans realized they no longer possessed the military strength to defeat European armies outright. Instead, they transformed their weakness into their greatest weapon. They exploited the paranoia of the great powers. If Russia conquered Istanbul, it would control the Mediterranean, threatening the British Empire's route to India. If Britain took it, France would be isolated. During the Crimean War, the Ottomans convinced Britain and France to bleed their own armies fighting Russia solely to keep the Ottoman state intact as a buffer. The twist is that the empire survived not by getting stronger, but by convincing the healthy empires that its death would result in their own mutual destruction. But diplomacy requires leverage, and an empire requires money. The fourth puzzle centers around the Ottoman economy. By the late 1800s, the empire was practically bankrupt, burdened by massive foreign debts. A state that cannot pay its functionaries should instantly disintegrate. The popular narrative suggests that Western powers simply looted the empire through economic imperialism, leaving it a hollow shell. While economic exploitation was real, the financial architecture of the late Ottoman period reveals a far more complex survival mechanism. Analyzing the registries of the Ottoman Public Debt Administration exposes the reality of the capitulations. Treaties granting foreign merchants extreme privileges and tax exemptions within Ottoman borders. At first glance, this looks like economic suicide. The real explanation is that by entangling European bankers so deeply into the Ottoman economy, the Sultan made the empire too big to fail. Because French and British bondholders owned huge portions of Ottoman infrastructure, they needed the government to survive long enough to collect their returns. The dramatic twist is that the very chains of financial ruin binding the empire were the tethers keeping it from falling apart. The West could not afford to let the Ottoman state collapse because European financial markets would crash alongside it. Surviving on borrowed money and diplomatic games is a precarious existence, and eventually, a state must defend itself from within. This brings us to the engineering problem of Ottoman military power. For centuries, the backbone of the empire was the Janissary Corps. But by the 1800s, this once elite force had become a corrupted mafia, violently blocking modernization while losing battles. The mystery is how the Ottomans managed to reform a military structure when the military itself held the power to execute the Sultan. The myth is that the Ottomans were culturally opposed to modern warfare. Restoration reports and military archives detail a terrifying internal purge known as the Auspicious Incident of 1826. Sultan Mahmud II secretly trained a new, modern artillery unit modeled on European lines. When the Janissaries revolted, Mahmud II ordered his new artillery to turn their cannons on the Janissary barracks in the heart of Istanbul, massacring thousands of his own soldiers. The profound twist is that the Ottoman state survived into the 20th century only because it was willing to perform a brutal amputation on itself. Modernization was not a peaceful transition of ideas. It was a desperate, bloody civil war fought to force an ancient empire into the industrial age. With a new army and a balancing act in Europe, the final puzzle was the sheer friction of distance. As the 20th century dawned, nationalist movements were tearing at the edges of the empire. How did the central government maintain a grip on distant provinces like Syria and the Hejaz? A common misconception is that the Ottomans remained a purely medieval force, riding camels while the rest of the world built the future. However, geological scans and the physical remains of late Ottoman infrastructure tell a story of rapid technological adoption. Under Sultan Abdulhamid II, the empire aggressively built the Hejaz Railway and strung thousands of miles of telegraph wire across mountains and deserts. The engineering explanation is that the empire used modern communication technology to compress time and space. A rebellion that once took weeks to report could now be telegraphed to Istanbul in minutes. But the twist changes our understanding of imperial survival. This technology was not used to foster a modern economy. It was utilized strictly as an instrument of autocratic surveillance and rapid military deployment. The Ottomans used the tools of the modern world to enforce an absolute monarchy. When we connect these revelations, a new image of the empire emerges. The longevity of the Ottoman state was not a drawn-out accident. From the meritocratic engineering of the Devshirme and the calculated outsourcing of the millet system to the geopolitical hostage-taking of European powers and the bloody modernization of its military, the state was constantly adapting. The empire did not survive despite being weak. It survived by weaponizing its weakness, its geography, and its debt. Looking back at the map of the 19th century, Tsar Nicholas I was wrong. The empire was not a dying man waiting quietly for the end. It was a shape-shifting entity fighting for its life, utilizing every diplomatic loophole, economic paradox, and technological advancement to cheat death for centuries. The story of why the Ottoman Empire survived so much longer than it should have forces us to rethink the nature of power. It shows us that in the relentless tide of history, survival does not always belong to the strongest or the most advanced. Sometimes survival belongs to those who are simply the most willing to adapt, endure, and manipulate the world around them.